Welcome to the DFS pregame show here on RotoGrinders. I'm Jordan Cooper, a.k.a. Blender HD, if you want to follow me on Twitter. And it's Monday, August 21st. And you know what we do on Mondays? Well, maybe not this Monday. James isn't here. Typically, it's Mondays with McCool. But James is on his way back from the Draftkings MLB Live Final, hopefully with the hurricane or tropical storms or whatever going on in San Diego. Gets home without, 36 hours of waiting at airports. But he'll be back next Monday. We'll talk about the live final experience that he had. I think he came in like 28th or something. He came in something. I think he made 45,000, 25,000 over a minimum or whatever. So I'm sure he's fine. I think based on how much he put in for live final qualifiers, I think he's profitable. So that's always good. Got a trip out of it. So congratulations, I guess, to him. Squirrel Patrol, our own Squirrel Patrol, came in second place. And if it weren't for the Tampa Bay Rays putting up like a bunch of runs late in their game, he would have won first. But oh well. Second place was, I think, $600,000. I think he's fine with that. I think John's fine with that. But congratulations to Squirrel Patrol. Cheese had a couple of entries in there. Didn't make it all the way, but I think he should have been profitable, I guess. But congratulations to everyone here at RotoGrinders. Hit that thumb button. Give all the thumbs to all the RotoGrinders people coming home from San Diego. Get home safe. If you don't hit the like button, they don't get home safe. The plane crashes, okay? So it's all up to you. So if we hear in the news that someone died in a flood, right? Someone here at RotoGrinders died in a flood or in a plane crash. It's all your fault. It's all your fault for not hitting the thumbs up button or the subscribe button or the notification bell, right? Hit that notification bell to know when anyone from here dies in a flood or a plane crash. That's the reason why you hit the notification bell. Wow, it's gotten morbid early in the week. Okay, whatever. What are we talking about today then? Since James isn't here with me. Well, I've been predicating this, the past couple of weeks to send in your questions. You could do that. Questions at theoryofdfs.com. I'm starting NFL DFS primer today, right? We're going to do this week and next week. I'm off for a couple of days, and then we're going to be into the week one of the NFL DFS season, and we'll be breaking down slates. We'll be reviewing stuff on Mondays with James, all of that. But we've been playing, obviously, MLB for like God knows how long. Does the season ever end? Does it ever end? I know college football's coming up. Soccer has started. MMA is always going on. Golf. So we may have gotten into the groove of like, MLB DFS. And this is how you play MLB, the nuances of the sport. But now we're transitioning into NFL. And what are the major differences between MLB, the three major sports, if you want to say like MLB, NBA, and NFL, okay? The major differences between the three sports from a very macro level on the three levers of DFS, okay? The three levers of DFS is something I talk about very heavily in the Theory of Daily Fantasy Sports. How to think like a professional DFS player. 15-hour audio DFS masterclass you can pick up at theoryofdfs.com. The three levers: projection, correlation, leverage, right? You're looking to balance all three things. You have too much of one, typically in negative EV, right? Too much projection, typically your ownership is way too high, right? Your leverage is way low. Correlation adds variance to your lineup. So when you're playing GPPs, typically correlation benefits you in both directions, right? You stack a team in baseball and they put up 0 runs, you're all the way in last place. They score 20 runs, you're all the way in first place, right? It helps you in that regard. But what's the difference between MLB, NBA, and NFL when it comes to those three levers? So let's take a look at the first lever, projection. Okay, I'm going to go over to lineup HQ. So we're going to see, obviously, if you sign up here at RotoGrinders, click on that link in the description, get $10 off your first month to the combo premium. You get everything, right? NBA will start up, you'll get that too. One-stop shop for all your projections, all your ownership, all the content, all the everything. Get almost too much stuff here. Lineup HQ, you need a lineup builder, right? There you go. You got it here also. So you'll see projections. You'll see these mean projections, the fantasy points, right? Here in lineup HQ. You also see floors and ceilings, right? Which is typically 15th and 85th percentile outcomes. Obviously, we don't have projected ownership for the first. I mean, the first slate of the year is what, 3 weeks away. So what does a typical projection, what does the distribution look like in comparison from NFL to MLB to NBA? Okay. NBA, from a projection standpoint, is the most normally distributed. Okay. It's not perfect. It's not, every player doesn't have a perfect normal distribution in basketball. But in basketball, it's an iterative scored sport. It's not an event-driven sport. Right? Someone that plays 8 minutes, it's very difficult for them to score 60 fantasy points. Because you can only do little at a time. Rebound here, point there, steal there, like that. So their outcomes, typically, in general, are normally distributed, which means the variance is much lower. So if a player is going to play 36 minutes and their mean projection is 28 points, there's a lot of 28s and 24s and 32s and 31s and 27s. There's a lot of bunched up in the middle because it's normally distributed. Then we go to baseball, MLB, the least normally distributed out of the three, right? You get a lot of zeros, but you also get 40s, right? A lot of the distributions of outcomes for basketball players look like a bell curve, and for MLB players look like I don't even know what you want to call it, that reverse sine curve, right? Kind of like starts at very top, a lot of zeros. You also get a lot of 3s and 5s, right? Because a single and a run or something, and then it just spans out from there. And then the more power hitters typically have go a little bit higher, right? Their curve on the end, because they have a lot more 30s than you have the low end hitters. Luis Arias doesn't have like 3 home run games. So that's what baseball batters typically look like. Pitchers are a little bit more normally distributed. Pitchers are much more on a bell curve. But hitters, dude, it's an event-driven sport, and most of the player pool get similar opportunities. So when we think of projection distribution, think of how you score points and how opportunities affect that. Okay. In NBA, opportunities are like minutes and shots. And do they have the ball at their hand? Okay. So, like, point guards and centers typically have much more normally distributed outcomes than like wings that 3-and-D wings. They don't touch the ball as often, right? So the more times you touch it, the more opportunities you have, the more normally distributive your distribution will be. Now, in Major League Baseball, yes, obviously we have some pinch hit risks and stuff like that, but most batters on a slate are going to bat 3 to 5 times, right? Around 4-ish, give or take. And the only difference between the hitters are how good they are as a hitter and how bad the pitcher that they're facing. Opportunities is, well, how high are they in the order? And how many runs is this team going to score so that, the batting order goes around? So, you have, the Mike Trouts, Aaron Judges, Ronald Acuñas, those types. They have plenty of zeros in their distribution also. Just as many as Kyle Isbell or someone or whatever. It's some low-end hitter on, the A's, Nick Allen or someone like that. But the opportunity is going to be about the same. Basketball doesn't work that way, right? Steph Curry's opportunities and the third center on the Raptors that gets 7 minutes at the end, much less opportunities. Football is kind of a mix of both. And obviously it depends on position, and we'll go through the positions when it comes to projection. So NFL players, on average, typically do not have a normally distributed distribution, right? It's not a bell curve. It's also not it's not this other curve with a lot of zeros. Typically, it's not binomial, right? Bimodal to some extent. It's typically like a big hump and then a small hump, kind of or a big hump and then you get some outlier outcomes. But a lot of times you don't get that many zeros. You don't get that many 1s. You don't get that many 2s. You start getting a lot of 4s, 5s, 6s, 7s, 8s. It starts coming up like that till around 12, 13-ish. Then it starts coming down, but you also start getting there are more like 21s and 26s. So it doesn't come that one side of the distribution is skewed heavily but significantly to the top side, right? Not many zeros, right? So it starts coming up quickly, but when it goes down a little bit slowly, which means you're looking necessarily when you're playing GPPs in NFL for those outcomes past the median, right? You don't care about the median. You care about how many outcomes are past the median. Now, in cash games, you may care about the medians, but one of the biggest things that people do not get in NFL is that what you're looking at are mean projections and not median projections. Okay, so if we take a look at wide receivers, let's take a look at running backs. Okay, running backs is a better example for this. So when you take a look at mean projections, and you see like Josh Jacobs, 16.99, so about 17 points. That's not a median. Like his median is probably like 12. Okay? What makes up most of his high-end outcomes? Well, in NFL, it's touchdowns, right? It's not necessarily yardage. It's not necessarily even, pass catching for a running back. It's touchdown. Touchdown is the event-driven part. Now, the difference between the event-driven part in NFL versus MLB is that in MLB, the event-driven part is a very large proportion of your score. NBA, it isn't at all, right? Someone steals the ball and then hits a three-pointer. That's what, 5.5 points? Out of their score of 40, right? So even on an event, they rebound the ball, they get an assist. Maybe they can score, what, 5.5, 6 points on one play? But when they're scoring, when it's a top-end player, they're scoring 60 fantasy points. That one event is a tenth of their score. Now in baseball, you're gonna play Stanton, Schwarber, one of those types of guys. Dude, most of their score is when they hit a home run. Most of their score is when they go 2 for 4 with a double and a hit. They're hitting for power. It's a very event driven. So when you look at a median on Schwarber of like 12, right? Not a median, a mean of 12. Like his median is way lower. His median maybe like 7.5. Because there's a lot of zeros, there's a lot of 3s, there's a lot of 2s, a lot of 5s. But there's also 28s. Right? He hits a home run, a 3-run home run, a double, and another RBI and 2 runs. Right? That's on this top. And those are event-driven stuff. If those events don't happen, he doesn't do well. NFL is kind of a mix of both. Right? In MLB, Schwarber's event, if he hits a solo home run of 14 points, that's like more than half of his score typically. Right? He ends up with 23 on the day. NFL is in the middle of both. Right? So Josh Jacobs, his mean is 17. A lot of that mean is when he scores a touchdown, 2 touchdowns, 3 touchdowns, right? Goal line carries, stuff like that. It's not the 6 catch, 50, 60-yard game. It's a lot in touchdowns. So if Josh Jacobs touches the ball 20 times, 15 carries, 17 carries and 3 receptions. He rarely gets to 17 as his mean without any touchdowns. Now, a touchdown in NFL DFS for wide receivers and running backs are 6 points. So how much is 6 points in relation to their mean? Well, it's a pretty decent part. 30%, right? 35%, something like that. 6 out of 17. McCaffrey obviously has a little bit higher because he catches more balls out of the backfield. Same for Eckler. But like someone like Nick Chubb, 16.93 is his mean projection. Well, that's nowhere near his median. His median may be like 10. There's a lot, because 6, 12 points, I mean, like, is very touchdown dependent. Wide receivers are a little less privy. It flip-flop. Like, over the past 10 years, wide receiver has gotten less variant, while running back has gotten much more variant, especially with running back committees, rotation. You don't have many bell cow running backs anymore. Wide receivers are typically, top-end wide receivers are at like 95% of the plays. So their opportunity share goes up. The running back opportunity share goes down. So it turns out now that wide receiver outcomes, their distributions, are more normally distributed than running backs, even though running backs touch the ball more on average, right? You get some of the top-end running backs, 20 to 25 touches. Top-end wide receivers may get, 8 or 9, 7 to 9, somewhere in that range. But the thing is that the variance for wide receivers is much lower. They're less dependent on touchdowns. Although, obviously, for high-end scores, for ceilings, you're going to need touchdowns. But how much is one touchdown on some of these guys mean outcomes? Not as big of a percentage, maybe 20%, 25%, rather than 35 to 40%. Which makes top-end wide receivers more valuable on average than top-end running backs, just due to variance. Because especially in PPR sites, FanDuel, it's used a little bit worse because they only do half-point PPR. But in full-point PPR, I mean, Justin Jefferson, yeah, I mean, you may not win a GPP with him scoring 24 points, right? 24 is still fine. But he could score 24 points without a touchdown, right? 9, what? You could go 9 for 110, right? And you get the 3-point bonus on the 100 yards. I mean, he could easily do that without a touchdown. It's hard for a running back to score 24 points without a touchdown. Yeah, you get the McCaffrey type sometimes, right? Sometimes they can, but most of the time they can't without scoring a touchdown. So understanding that when you distribute your salary and you increase the variance of your lineup for GPPs. The old school thinking, when there were more bell cow running backs, is that you pay for safety and running back and you take your variance at wide receiver. Now it's the other way. You should think of it the other way. You give me a choice between McCaffrey or Jefferson, and I take Jefferson all the time. Jamar Chase, Devontae Adams, those types of guys, much more normally distributed. And they're not normally distributed, but it's more than running backs are. So how does that affect, because of the way that the projections work out? Well, if we go in here right now, it's going to be, I want McCaffrey at 8,700 because his mean will be 21.77, right? We take a look at the difference, right? It's like, I could pay for either Cooper Kupp or Christian McCaffrey or Justin Jefferson. Justin Jefferson has a almost 1 point lower mean projection than Christian McCaffrey. But let me tell you, Justin Jefferson actually has more 21s in his distribution than Christian McCaffrey does. So even though the mean is higher by 1 point for McCaffrey, Justin Jefferson is actually less variant. That I'd much rather at the wide receiver position from a median perspective, like cash games. I think the cash game approach is you pay down a running back and you pay up a wide receiver. That anytime you're paying more than like $7K for a running back, you're paying for ceiling. It used to be in the past, you just jam in the 8K, 9K running backs, and you didn't mind a 4K wide receiver, that like a slot receiver. But those slot receivers, their range of outcomes is very narrow. Like, it's very hard to increase the variance of your lineup with 4K receivers that are slot receivers. 4K receivers that go out and catch bombs, those are good for GPPs, but they scare you to death in cash games. Where you play $3,200 guy that may only see two targets. Of course, the targets are 28 yards down the field. But if they don't catch those, you're sitting there with zero. So this is how projections work in NFL. When it comes to quarterbacks are even more lopsided than they used to be. Okay, that distribution, it's not. Quarterbacks used to be more normally distributed on average, the whole field of quarterbacks. But now there are quarterbacks that have much more skewed distributions and ones that have way narrow distributions. So you'll see a lot in NFL DFS that, like, going down and playing Derek Carr or Jordan Love or Sam Howell, Desmond Ridder, even Matthew Stafford, I guess, on this first slate. Like, you'll see these projections and there won't be all, it's like, oh, there's a gap of there's 5 points in between all the quarterbacks. So you'll be saying to yourself, it's like, why am I going to pay up for Jalen Hurts at 7,800 where I could save 2,000 in salary and only give up 4 mean projected points? It seems like a lot. It's like, why, I'll save the money at quarterback. That used to be what NFL DFS was. Quarterback outcomes tended to be more bunched up. Not anymore. Now we have quarterbacks that have distributions that second bump has gotten way higher. Right? And the guys like Kirk Cousins and Derek Carr, the statuesque quarterbacks that play for teams that run the ball a little too much, their distributions have gotten much more narrow. So you'll see that playing guys like Hurts, Jackson, Burrow, Herbert, Fields, those types of guys, although the mean projection may only be a difference of 4 points, their 80th percentile outcome is going to be way higher than a Kirk Cousins 80th percentile outcome. And especially when there's a lot of them on a slate, you have to figure someone puts up 35 plus points at quarterback. And remember, in DFS, we're playing a game of relative points. It's like, oh, I played a 5K quarterback and got 20. Sounds good in a vacuum. But if there were 2 quarterbacks on the slate that put up 40 points, you're going to need them. Doesn't matter what, how much. I want my quarterback to get 4x value, 5x value. And don't worry about any of that. There's no number. It's all in relation to one another. There'll be certain slates where some of the top end quarterbacks, they're not on the slate. They're on the Thursday game, Monday, Sunday night game. They got a bye week. And you take a look and, well, I'm not sure if any quarterback is going to put up over 30 points. Those would be the slates where you save money at quarterback. And you could save the same at any position. You're trying to beat players relatively. So you always have to view things in relative terms. Oh, I'm going to play the highest team total the game on the slate. People stack games. Oh, this total is 49. It's the highest team total on the slate. But what happens if there were 6 games that were 47.5s? In relative terms, 1 game at 49 total versus 6 at 47.5. It's not that grand of a difference that you should be treating that one way higher than the others, even though it is the highest team total game. But let's use the other example. You have one game that has a 58.5 total, and the next highest game has a 44.5 total, and there's a bunch of those. That matters a lot more. The gap relatively between the games. And the same exists for players. It's all in relation to one another. So this is projection. So let's talk about correlation. All 3 sports. NBA, limited correlation. I'm not saying there's none, but it's limited. Correlation is not, if you disregarded thinking about correlation at all in NBA, I don't think you'd suffer that much, right? There's not that much of it. So well, what if it goes into overtime? Yeah, sure. That's only a very small percentage of time. or two centers on the same team. They don't share the court together. Yeah, you're probably avoiding some of those situations a little bit, but it's not as grand of an effect as you think it is. Then you have MLB. Correlation is insanely important. Bad hitters on the same team are highly correlated to one another, both on outcomes as well as opportunities. People seem to forget that. They think in MLB and they go, well, this guy gets a hit, and then this guy runs him in, and this guy, and then it's like dink, 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 dink. And that's why they're correlated, which is a part of it. But the correlation is very much in plate appearances. As a team scores more and more runs, there aren't outs being recorded, which means that when the team scores 14 runs, like all of these batters are getting up 5, 6, maybe even 7 times. That's more opportunities to score points. Much better than a team that only scored 2 runs and only 3 hitters got 4 at-bats, got 4 plate appearances. And that's why when you stack, it's like, oh, do I do 1, 2, 3, 4? Do I do like the order? Doesn't matter as much. Most of the correlation comes from them just being on the same team and getting more plate appearances as the team does better. Less of the correlation is on, well, the third batter and the fourth batter. Yeah, they're slightly more correlated. But it shouldn't be something that you should be all end all of building MLB lineups. Same thing for NBA. Well, if I play this guy on one side of the game, can I play this guy and this guy together? Most of the time, it would be better spent if you just didn't even spend time on it. It wouldn't hurt you that much. NFL is kind of in the middle. It's kind of in the middle. There's obviously team-based correlation, right? Quarterback to wide receiver. Like when one guy gets points, the other guy gets points. It's very easy to see in NFL. So typically, you're going to be playing at least a pass catcher with your quarterback. Some people use running back and DST. There is a correlation, but the correlation is at its mean and its median and not at its ceiling. DST scoring is primarily built around pick sixes and return touchdowns for ceiling, not points allowed. So you may think it's like, oh, running back. Oh, the running back in the fourth quarter is just running the ball a ton and blah, blah, blah. Because they're up, 3 touchdowns or something. Yeah, but that defense, could still only score 7 points. I mean, like, yeah, they're correlated at that extent, but not to like the 23-point defensive score. So running back DST correlation is not all that important for GPPs, at least. There's also correlation of, as the team does better, how many more opportunities do all players get? There are 2 lines of thinking when it comes to negative and positive correlation, and they both apply. When one player on a team scores a touchdown, that means another player on the team couldn't have scored that touchdown. So people think in terms of, well, if Joe Burrow throws the ball, I mean, I'm not even aware who's on what team at this point. Geno Smith and Kenny Walker. Yeah, I'll use that example. Geno Smith throws a touchdown to DK Metcalf. Well, that took away an opportunity for Kenneth Walker to score a touchdown. So DK Metcalf and Kenneth Walker are negatively correlated in that regard. Is that true? Yes, it is true. But they are also positively correlated in the regard that the more possessions that the Seahawks have, it benefits them both. Right? Because the problem in NFL when it comes to that negative correlation example is that when DK Metcalf scores, their opponent gets the ball back. Right? It's not like they get the ball again. If it was the type of thing that anytime you scored a touchdown, you also got the ball back, then there would be positive correlation up the wazoo for everyone on the team. But we see plenty of times that, if team's rolling, they give the ball back to their opponent who's passing, they go 3 and out, and they get the ball right back. I'm not even talking about interceptions or fumbles. Like, there are games where you see the first half, it's 24-3. The other team could barely move the ball, and one team had the ball for 23 minutes out of the 30 minutes. So it's quite possible in those scenarios that Kenny Walker and DK Metcalf are positively correlated. So you'll see some lineups that win GPPs and go, well, they had to stack with the running back that isn't a pass catcher. It's like, yeah, well, if they score 35 plus points and have 45 plus minutes of possession, then sure, you'd want everyone on the team, right? So there's some positive correlation and some negative correlation. Typically, as the price goes up, you care more about that negative correlation. And as the price goes down, you care more about the positive correlation. Like if Kenny Walker was 9K and DK Metcalf was 10K, like in order for the ceilings at those prices, you want 35 plus points. Unless the Seahawks are putting up 60, they're putting up, 7 touchdowns, 8 touchdowns. At those prices, it's hard for them both to have a ceiling. If DK Metcalf was 5K and Kenny Walker was min-priced, you'd be jamming him into every lineup. The threshold of how many points you really need for those prices, Kenny Walker could have a, 80-yard, 2-touchdown game. DK Metcalf could have a 100-yard, 1-touchdown game, and you're fine at those prices, at those salaries. People ask about game stacks when it comes to correlation. There is correlation in the same game, but it's nowhere as high as people tend to make it out. Right? A lot of people, I'll build a quarterback with 2 wide receivers and then a player on the other side of the game. Because you want a lot of plays in the game. Big play, and then the team gets the ball back. Then another big play, and then the team gets the ball back. That type of stuff. There is a correlation there. Yes, that is a positive correlation. Is it the be-all, end-all? No. Do I need a run back? Do I not need a run back? Don't ever use the term need. You don't need anything. So when it comes to game stacks, it's like, I'm going to play 7 guys from the same game. Like, you better hope the game scores like 80 points. Now you're getting to the point where you're getting more negatively correlated than positively correlated. People think too much in game stacks and too little in game environments. Okay? If you were to study the data, because when typically you're looking at games, right? Because you're going to be stacking a quarterback with wide receivers. You're going to be doing something. You're going to be aiming for games. The more and more points, like NFL betting lines, like spreads and totals, are like some of the most efficient markets in anything. I mean, like in anything. The closing lines in NFL are very high R values. Okay? So using it to your benefit. Now, they're obviously incorporated already into these mean projections. So you don't even have to look at them. But if you're approaching NFL DFS from a game perspective, the more and more, the higher, better way to put it, the higher and higher the team total is, the more exponentially likely that the team passes their team total. Now, that seems like counterintuitive. It's like, isn't the team total supposed to be like a median? It's like, yes, that's correct. But in NFL DFS, we're not betting the over. We're not betting the under. The numbers that we see right here, right? The Chargers, 26.5. Dolphins, 24. Those are median numbers. Betting lines are medians. They're not means. Okay? The projections on players are mean projections and not medians. Understanding that difference matters. So if we take a look at a low-scoring game, Atlanta 22.75, Carolina 19.75. So what? That's a 42.5 total. Now, in order to win in GPPs, we want the games that we're stacking or that we're targeting to go dramatically over the total. You don't win GPPs when the game goes its total. Goes over. We play Minnesota Tampa Bay with what, 45.5 total. We want it to score 65, 70 points. Any game that we stack, any game that we play, we want it to be a 42 to 34 game. We want it to be a 32 to 24. We want it to be 60 plus points. And because these betting lines are medians, we have to the lower end totals are much less likely to go for 60 plus points than the high end totals. I know that sounds like, oh well, yeah, well, obviously I target the high total. Yes. But if you're like, if you're going to be like, oh, no one's playing Carolina Atlanta, I'm going to stack that game. And then you have like 4 games that have 50 plus totals. Like the likelihood that one of those 50 plus totals put up way more than 50 is way higher than that game outscoring all 4 of those games. As you go up in total, the more and more likely that game goes over the total. Because betting lines are medians, not means. Okay, this is very important because people look at this and go, I'm gonna play the 38 total game, and I'm gonna stack it. Does that come in? Depending on ownership, right? It's 1% owned. Maybe you take a shot, right? Like no one's, but maybe this is the outlier outcome. But for the most part, when you're stacking, right? When you're playing multiple pieces from the same game, you're going to be doing that with higher total games. Because the mean outcomes of those games are higher than the mean outcomes of the lower total games. Even though you may look at this and go, well, the medians, right? The medians don't look that great, right? You take a look at there's not many. Seattle, Los Angeles, the Rams. And you go, well, 47.5. 47, that isn't that high. That isn't shootout high. Like that has so much more likelihood of going 60, 70 points than the 39.5 total game. That the ownership, one game is 3 times less owned. And well, maybe it should be 3 times less owned. Doesn't mean you can't play a piece from that game. But when you're thinking about putting in multiple pieces, you should always consider that these numbers, these implied team totals are medians, not means. The mean distribution. Remember, we went all the way back to the projection element of that distribution is not normal. It's not normal. It's not bimodal, but it's kind of like semi double bumped. Right? It goes up, down, and then it slides. It slides. It doesn't go straight down. So the high total games have that all those 55, 60, 65, 70s in its mean. Although the median on like it may be like this Chargers Dolphins game, which is currently the highest total game, 50.5. So maybe 50.5 is the median. But the mean may be like 57, 58. Right? Maybe even that high. 55, 56. Right? Because there's a lot of games where it is 38 to 31, right? 69 points. A lot of those outcomes. Not as many as 7 to 3 outcomes. But then you take a look at one of the lower total games, like what Atlanta, Carol, let's see. And what's the lowest total? Oh, San Francisco, Pittsburgh. Or Arizona, Washington. That's it. That's even lower. 39. Right? That's the median. 39. What's the mean? The mean may only be like 43. Something like that. Doesn't spread. There aren't as many 60s or 70s at all. There may be a bunch of 52s, 54s, stuff like that, but not many 60s or 70s. So the difference from median and mean from the Arizona-Washington game compared to the Dolphins-Chargers game is much more dramatic, even though the medians, like, okay, the medians are 11 points apart, but the means are like 15 points apart. This is something that you have to calculate. I'm not sitting here saying you have to calculate this. Just from a macro concept. The higher the totals of the implied team totals, the higher the means are. And we're looking for high-end outcomes. Right? We're not betting on the over. We're not betting the Chargers. If the Chargers put up 27 points, like, yes, if you bet the over on the 26.5, you'd win. If the Chargers put up 70 points for whatever reason, you don't win any more money, right? Right? You still win your bet. But in DFS, if they put up 70 and you stack them, you won the whole thing. You care about those outcomes and what they look like. When you bet, you don't. You're playing medians. Mamba asks in the chat, does the theory DFS also teach best ball strategy or just GPP and cash? No, the theory of daily fantasy sports. Best ball would be considered a season long. I mean, it's still a math and probability. I mean, I'm not saying that the concepts in the theory of DFS, I mean, you could apply to best ball. It's a way of thinking. It's all about probability and statistics. So yes, it will benefit you regardless. Like, dude, if you listened to the 15-hour audio DFS masterclass, obviously we have all these DFS pregame shows. You could listen to 500 hours of content if you want and get it all. If you listen to this, you'll be able to approach any fantasy-based game much more properly, much more appropriately, much more profitably. I would suggest you get it anyway. Make you think about the game in a much more plus EV way. So theoryofdfs.com. So lastly, before we get out of here, mention leverage. Or maybe we'll talk about leverage tomorrow. I got all week. We got next week. Yeah, I'll talk about leverage tomorrow. Right? Because I wanted to make the projection and correlation points. Because we'll talk a little bit even more about correlation tomorrow also. If you got any questions, send them in. Questions at theoryofdfs.com. NFL DFS. I mean, obviously, if you got any question at all, if you got questions about Lineup HQ, got questions about anything here at the tools or RotoGrinders, send them in as well. Questions at theoryofdfs.com. But specifically, this week and next week, or NFL, we're doing all NFL DFS primer stuff. We'll talk about Showdown, right? We got Showdown stuff. Because that now we had a fourth level there. The duplication lever comes in there. Combinatoric lever, if there is a lever. These are like kind of little, they're like the clutches. They're not the main levers. We'll talk about that. But for the most part, you're still playing. NFL DFS is still played like any other DFS sport. The macro over everything still applies. You're trying to find lineups, the highest projection for the lowest ownership. The highest range of outcomes for the lowest amount of points that you share with the field. At the end of the day, like if you just went by that, you'll probably be better than most of the field, especially in NFL DFS, and especially the first month or two in the season, right? Typically, they're the softest fields. But if you got questions, send them in. Questions at theoryofdfs.com. Hit that thumbs up button on your way out the door. You know how much I like the thummy thumbs. And remember, if you don't hit it, and one of the RotoGrinders staff members either drowns in a flood or dies in a plane crash, it was your fault because you didn't hit it. We didn't get enough likes, right? It'd be like they'll be on the news. Like, what caused this plane crash? And we don't know. The NTSB is there. You'd see the air disasters episode. Everything was fine. That plane was mechanically sound, right? It was 35,000 feet in the air, sailing fine, right? Trade table, people were drinking, everything was fine. Next thing you know, nose first into the ground. They look at the black box, right? They look at the voice recording, right? They don't find anything. Then they do a search on YouTube. They go, DFS pregame show, 8/21/23. Dude, this show didn't even get 40 likes. That was the cause. And there was a RotoGrinders person. That's the reason. Right? That's the reason. And it's all your fault. So save the play, just like Devin says, save the play and hit the like button. We need to get our likes up. I think this is the guilt people. Do your part. Save the play. Hit the like button. Hit the subscribe button. We got Grinders Live later today. We got tons of content here. Click the link in the description. Get $10 off your first month. And I'll be back tomorrow answering your DFS strategy questions like I always do here. Monday through Friday, 11 o'clock Eastern on the DFS pregame show on RotoGrinders.com.